morning, Mark. How are you?
Very well, Peter. How are you?
Oh, absolutely brilliant. Sun is shining. Can't be better. Can't be
Can't,
better.
can't be bad that.
So, Mark, welcome to the NI Business Podcast. Thanks very much for taking the time to chat with me this morning. Could we start? Could you tell me a little about your background and through to where you are today?
Sure. I started my career as a legal academic, I suppose, many moons ago. Um, and I was also a trade union official for what was then called the National Association of Teachers in Further and Higher Education, which is now the University and College Union. So I was a lecturer in law, specializing in employment law, and also a regional official. So I was responsible for negotiating terms and conditions for lecturers in the FE colleges, the further education colleges across Northern Ireland. And that was really my sort of background in industrial relations. In 2000, I joined the Labour Relations Agency as a senior employment relations officer. I became director of employment relations services in 2019, and I was appointed about a year ago as the chief executive of the Labour Relations Agency. So I'm kind of steeped in the world of industrial relations beforehand and very much now.
Well, congratulations on your appointment a year ago. I'm gonna hazard a guess that people that have engaged, I would say a lot of people have heard of the Labour Relations Agency, and people that have engaged with you will know what you do. But I'm gonna, from an outsider's perspective, I'd love to know a little bit more, and I'm sure that there's people that haven't engaged with you that wouldn't know the variety of services that you offer. Is that a fair
No, I think that's a fair
assessment?
assessment. The people who use our services know us very well, and the end-to-end service that we provide. I think there's a lot of people who don't know who we are, and that's probably for a very good reason. Um, I suppose the context and the backdrop to this is we're 50 years old next year in 2026. So we have the statutory responsibility for improving employment relations in Northern Ireland. Okay, and as I say, we're approaching our 50th birthday, excuse me, which is really exciting. Very excited about that. But a lot of people never cross our door, and they hear the term labor relations and they think, well, that's what's that got to do? What's that really about? Some people have the perception that all we do is resolve big disputes that you hear on the TV and the radio about pay and terms and conditions. And whilst that's a very important part of our job, a more important part of our job is about that sort of preventative thing, about advising, about giving information, about pointing in the right direction, about creating an atmosphere where the potential for a dispute is reduced, minimized, or eliminated. So at the minute, for example, you'll hear the Minister for the Economy talk about the good jobs economy. And what does that mean? Well, good jobs are things like, that relate to pay and terms and conditions and voice and representation and work-life balance and flexible working and all of the things that make, if it is a good job, that the chances of you being in dispute about your terms and conditions are minimized. And that's what's really what we're about. And so there's this, I suppose, like an internal struggle with the dispute resolution and the dispute prevention. It's a yin and yang, constantly
Mhm.
in battle. I would love to see the dispute resolution part of our business made redundant, where people aren't dispute whatsoever, and look at the preventative stuff to create the conditions for good work. So, we do everything from workplace information service where people can phone up and say, I have this issue at work about a policy or a person or a procedure, whatever it happens to do. So last year we did 15,000 of those. So not a small number. We had 17 big industrial disputes last year in where we got, and we got the vast majority of those resolved. We also mediate in disputes between interpersonal disputes between people in the workplace. It might be allegations of bullying and harassment, and we can get in there and try to resolve those sort of disputes. So it's really where people choose to contact us dictates what service we provide. If it's somebody, wondering about something, a phone call might answer their question and they go away satisfied and they get the answer they wanted. If they come to us too late and say, I was fired last week, what are my rights? The ship has sailed, and then it's really about trying to see if you can resolve that through some form of settlement prior to it maybe going to an industrial tribunal. So I suppose it's really from that. It's from a phone call asking about information right through to conciliation, trying to resolve a dispute before it goes to a tribunal, or a collective conciliation, trying to resolve a pay dispute.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's easier to deal with ripples than tsunamis in that context.
Absolutely. And every day we have ripples and tsunamis in equal measure.
And if you think about the target market, if you like, so the people that could avail of your services but don't,
Yeah.
how could you, what sort of message would you have to put out to the people that haven't engaged with you before and wouldn't know why they should?
I think it's probably just about awareness. Very, very often the LRA, Labour Relations Agency, some people, there's an in-house joke here that people say that it stands for the last resort agency. So in other words, people only contact us when things have really gone pear-shaped and they've asked somebody else, who do I contact on this? So whilst your work's going well and things are good at work, you probably don't need to know about us because there's nothing there. You're happy with your terms and conditions. You're happy with your pay. You're happy with your leave. Everything's good in that regard, and that's absolutely the way it should be. But if people, like, we would like to raise the awareness of our existence so that people, if they need to check in on things like, well, what is the change in the national minimum wage, and can my employer change that contract, and you know things that arise on a daily basis for individuals. Um, when they come to us, they know our services and know us well. But there is a greater, a wider sort of network of people who never come across our door, who never have to use our services. And one perspective is that's maybe a good thing, and the other perspective is, well, we'd like you to know that we exist in the event that you need information and advice. But here's the thing, Peter. Our client base is probably 50-50 employers and employer bodies, as
Mhm.
well as trade unions and employees and representatives and solicitors. So it's, we are we're an independent, impartial, free and confidential service. And that's really, really important. It's free at point. There's no charge to our services. So the information and advice you get, there's no charge that we do training, which there's no charge for. Absolutely. It's very much a public service. But it's important that people know we exist in the first place to get that
Yeah.
service to them. And it's not purely for employees or not purely for employers. It is straight down the middle in terms of our independence. And we guard that independence and that impartiality jealously because we're not an employer's body, we're not a trade union body. We sit in the middle. And that's why we're often seen as the referee or the arbitrator and the mediator, or whatever.
Mhm.
And that's exactly what we're meant to do, you know.
And are there any restrictions on the size of businesses? I think some people may have the misconception that it's only for big businesses, big organizations, trade unions, trade disputes, all that sort of stuff. Well, tell me a little more about that.
Absolutely not. We have businesses in here. We have corner shops and, employers who run corner shops who are micro employers. And I suppose it's really important because the private sector in Northern Ireland is made up of, micro employers. It is the lifeblood of the private sector economy. So on any given day in the organization, either virtually or in person, we will have small employers, medium-sized employers, and we will have the big multinationals. But it's usually only the multinationals one that hit the media, and then people hear secondhand or through a snippet on the media that we're involved in a particular issue or a dispute or whatever it happens to be. But there's so much goes on behind the scenes, and I suppose confidentiality is a double-edged sword, Peter, in the sense that you guard it very, very closely, and you keep all of this confidential because people don't want to do their dirty washing in public, absolutely. So we guard that jealously, but then you can't publicize the fact that this is happening.
Mm.
So I often feel like a submarine commander. I'm running silent, running deep, and nobody knows that we exist. So images of the Red October.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So and a lot of that goes on unseen, and rightly so, because we guard that confidentiality. But back to your point, we have as many small employers in this coming in and phoning in and looking for advice, especially micro employers, because they don't have their own HR departments. They maybe only have 6 or 7 employees. They're expanding rapidly. They have contracts and they have policy documents they need a hand with. They need to know how to handle difficult conversations. all of the soft skills and policies and procedures that you need to allow a business to grow, we will help employers with. But we don't necessarily publicize the fact that they're getting into bother, or there's been a a high profile case taken against them or whatever. So that it is a balancing act. Every day is a balancing act with regard to publicizing your services, maintaining confidentiality.
And I'm sure you've seen a lot over the years, a lot of which you probably can't even talk about. But what would you
No,
say? What would you say has been your biggest lesson since being in the labor relations agency?
it's a really good question. Just knowing people. Just knowing people, having that sense of self-awareness and emotional intelligence, knowing how the economy works, knowing how people work, knowing your sectors, and getting a real feel for the industry. Because Northern Ireland's a village, so I see the same trade union officials day and daily. You know how they operate. You know the politics behind it. You see a lot of the big employers that you see on TV. Again, you know what their drivers are, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really getting in under the skin of the people that you're dealing with. You know, it is, and walking that mile in their shoes to get to know your market. And I have honed that over the last 25 years, and I think that that gives me a sense of I know my market. I know the people involved in it, and we facilitate the Northern Ireland Engagement Forum, which is a big round table of employers like the Institute of Directors, the CBI, Northern Ireland Chamber, Federation of Small Businesses, and on the other side of the table is the Northern Ireland Congress of the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, which is all the trade unions. So that's a really important group, stakeholder group, where in a safe space we can go in and talk and discuss about big policy issues, changes in legislation, where people are coming from, in such a way that it is done on a face-to-face basis, and there's a degree of trust built there. There's a relationship built there. They know that what's going on in the room will not be publicized out in the public domain, and that's about building relationships. I mean, fundamentally, I'm about facilitating good employment relations at a micro level and at a macro level.
Very good. Nice summary. What about yourself? What have you learned about yourself along the way?
To be patient. It's not, it's not an inherent quality that I have, Peter. So I had to learn to be patient. My wife says it's a work in progress. So so it's a constant it's a constant thing to be patient. When you work in the public sector, sometimes the wheels turn very slowly, and in the private sector, it's very fast paced and dynamic. And when the two meet, sometimes there's a sort of clash, and you just have to be patient about knowing how things work. But when you know that, and it's a bit like that, in management theory, I think it's called the Johari window. You know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know. So that it every day is a school day. Every day is a school day. And I suppose from my perspective, it's about that continuous professional improvement and development, noticing where my weak spots were, definitely with regard to patience and trying to get things done. That was one of the big salutary lessons that I learned over the years, to be patient about things, and know when to push a button and when not to, and stuff like that. And that just comes with experience.
And who would you say has influenced you the most along your journey?
Oh my goodness, that's a really good question. I suppose I've had a variety of sort of professional mentors as I was going through. Some of them, I'm not going to embarrass them by naming them, so I'll say some of them were in the legal fraternity.
Mhm.
Some of them were very high-ranking trade union officials, and two chairs of various boards, one in the voluntary sector and one in the public sector. And I suppose the combination, there are about five high profile individuals who have been at various stages of my career de facto mentors and coaches, who have sort of guided and helped me establish my own path, and becoming, I'll be honest with you, chief executive of the Labour Relations Agency is my dream job. I am, this is where I want to be. This isn't, I'm not a public sector journeyman. I'm not a civil servant. This is where I want to be. If people say, what do you do? I work for the public. I'm a public servant, and my role is to facilitate the improvement of employment relations in Northern Ireland. So your work is my work, is probably the best way to describe it.
What about let's whenever you're not in your dream job,
Yes.
let's say you're on a desert island and you have a book or a podcast, or both, anything that you would share that resonates with you?
Yeah, I have a penchant for David McWilliams, the Irish economist. He does a podcast every week, and it's very relaxed but very, very informative, and very funny, and very funny. So I tend not to miss that podcast. It's well worth a listen. So, and lots of different podcasts on everything from films to book reviews to whatever. I listen to a lot of podcasts about book reviews because I don't get the chance to read the books.
Okay.
So I sort of fast track the reading part and get the review, get the review on podcast. So a book review podcast at David McWilliams would definitely be up there.
And what would you say is the biggest challenge that you and your organization are currently facing?
Um, I have this is a shameless plug. I've just launched our corporate strategy for 25 to 29 within the last week. It's up on socials. Please feel free to download it. And theme two of our corporate plan is really about that sort of good jobs agenda in terms of the preventative work along, trying to create the conditions whereupon the chances of a dispute are reduced. I want to be doing more in the preventative sphere than I am in the resolution sphere. However, I have the common sense to know that that's not always within my control because there are a lot of political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors that will influence that, and they're out with my control. So in terms of my corporate vision for the organization, it is ambitious, but is tempered by fiscal reality, Peter. Let's be honest. That ability to pivot back or to curb something or to redirect something or whatever, could be influenced by a cut in funding or, a change in political direction or, something falling off the radar. So it's being alive to all of that at any given time. And, you'll pivot from vision to operation and back. So you're up to 30,000 feet and back down again in a matter of minutes. That's the world of a chief executive.
And if you could invite any three people to a dinner party, who would you invite?
Don't ask me that question. I need a bigger dining. I need a bigger dining room, Peter. I need a bigger dining room. I'm not gonna fall for Martin Luther King and Gandhi and all the standard ones. The list is too long, Peter. The list is too long. I need the sort of the dining room in Harry Potter and Hogwarts. That one of those type of tables. That's what I need. So don't pin me to three people. I
All
need
right, well,
300.
we got Martin Luther King and Gandhi out of you anyway, so we'll settle for that. And what about if you could go back in time and give some advice to your 18-year-old self, what would that sound like?
Be more curious. Be more curious. That's probably the advice, and I mean that in the broad sense. I mean that
Yeah.
in the life sense, in the professional sense, in the whatever. It's the old quote, the Oscar Wilde quote. Youth is wasted on the young. Uh, Absolutely. Go back. I would be more curious about everything, about especially around the world of work. I think one of my key strategies going forward is to engage more with young people with regard to the world of work. There is
Mhm.
definitely a knowledge deficit for young people in school and colleges about what the world of work looks like. They look at it through the lens of maybe the part-time job that they have, but that's not really, it's only dipping their toe into it. It's not the real world of work. So one of the things that we'll be doing in the coming months is we're going to meet with the Northern Ireland Youth Forum. We're going to bring them in. I think pizza might be on the menu and have a discussion with them to say, what what are your expectations? What are your hopes and your fears around the world of work? And see what they, as a customer focus group, see what they have to say and say, look, I don't really, because you read so much about people saying, millennials have this worldview about work-life balance, and they have this
Mhm.
worldview about job security, and they have this worldview about um, you know, promotions and expectations and whatever. And they're very different from people of my generation. Very, very different. And I don't think people have a handle on that. I don't think people have. So I want to hear it firsthand. I want to hear it firsthand from them. And I think that will help us sort of frame where we're going because I'm looking. 10 years in the future. I'm looking to see which jobs will be replaced by AI.
Mm.
I'm looking to see what the future of flexible working looks like. I'm looking to see where hybrid working disputes come and go. So these are all things that, I'm looking five years down the line at.
Mhm. And that resonates a lot with me. I spend a lot of time speaking to the business owner side of things, and
Yes.
they spend an awful lot of time getting really good at what they do, but not necessarily a huge amount of time in learning how to run a business. So
No,
there's a
absolutely.
direct correlation there.
There
So
is, and I think it's important to sort of harness that entrepreneurial spirit, but put it into focus in regard to things about people and how you do things, as
mhm.
opposed to being the operational expert. And I understand that. I speak to business owners all the time, and they're firefighting. They're
Yeah.
firefighting every day. Don't talk to me about development. I'm in survival mode, or don't talk to me about people issues. I can't get people. And then you start to realize, look, there's issues around the broader pictures, are the issues around recruitment and retention, or there's broader issues around the fact that the owner doesn't have the business, the softer people skills, and it's just about compliance. And businesses are saying, look, have to, increase in national minimum wage, increase in national insurance, the cost of doing business. Don't give me anything that walks or quacks like more regulation. So I know the mindset of the micro employer, because I speak to them all the time, and it is a balancing act. It is a balancing act.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to read the label when you're inside the bottle at times.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that is that it's not it's the ability to step outside yourself and look at that and say, okay, where am I missing? There's definitely dots that need to be joined up that I haven't done yet, and that needs to be done. People just need to take that time to do that.
So instead of looking back, let's look forward. So 5 years down the line, what does the Labour Relations Agency look like then?
Good question. Will it even be called a labor relations agency? Do people connect with that? That's a discussion I'm having in my head. We're a well-established brand by the people who know us. We're maybe not as well known by the people who don't know us, obviously, and that goes without saying. Does the word labor, does that connotations from everything from a political party to childbirth? So what you know fundamentally, our role is still will still be the same, I think. But I think there will be a greater focus on the good work stuff, the stuff that really has for years caused the issues. Like people have problem with three things, Peter. Let's be honest: pay, policies, and other people. If you boil it down to pay, policies, and other people, that's if you boil it down to that, that's what causes the difficulties, and they often end in disputes, and they often end in tribunals for unfair dismissal, harassment by other staff, or the misapplication of a policy. I mean, over and above that, all the rest's window dressing. People, pay, and policies are what. So my focus going forward is to preventatively resolve the issue before it becomes a problem in those three areas.
And if someone has thought, I'm going to reach out to the Labour Relations Agency, maybe someone that hasn't done before, what's the best way for them to go about that?
Get onto our website, www.lra.org.uk, and then you'll have access. You'll get access into our, if you want to phone us, the phone numbers on the homepage. If you want to contact us, info@LRA is there as well. And you'll see from the website, we modify our website more and more. And it's interesting because we just talked about young people. Young people don't use websites anymore. I sometimes I feel it necessary to do a TikTok dance with our with our with our phone number flashing in front of it in order to get young people's attention, because they see lots of young people see websites as information repositories. That's all they're doing. They just hold reams and reams of information, and if they can't get what they need within 2 clicks, they'll not go on it. So it's about accessibility in that sense is really, really important. But we still get, as I said, 15,000 calls last year. We had a lot of people who want to speak to other people. People don't
Yeah.
want chatbots. They don't, and very often you have the sort of someone on the end of a computer, and they're going backwards and forwards. To get into the nuance of a relationship difficulty in work, through an online presence doesn't always work, because you can't manage the conversation the same way as you can on the phone. But yet again, having a 21-year-old daughter who rarely answers her phone, young people don't like to talk. It's a really strange phenomenon. They don't
Yeah, I
like
got
to
it. A
talk,
20-year-old son, I get that. Absolutely.
and
But
you
go ahead,
can't
we'll keep
ignore that.
working at them.
Yeah, I know they're they're all a work in progress, as are we. But I mean, you have to say, well, look, you take that out of the social context and put that into a work context. What does that mean about future modes of communication?
Mm,
And are the younger generation happy to have an AI generated response as opposed to speaking to an individual? that 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 can't be ignored, because that's coming down the track. That's coming down the track.
mm,
People do not phone us and ask what's the national minimum wage, because they can find that out by
yeah.
asking their phone, and so they'll speak to whatever Copilot or whatever Chat GPT or whatever it happens to be, and that's the reality, and that's where it's going. So the our whole mode of delivery is very much dictated to by our whole mode of communication. And if you have a generation of young people coming through who aren't really fond of lifting the phone, which they don't seem to be,
Mm.
it seems to be across the board, then that fundamentally has to impact on your business model.
Look, Mark McAllister from the LRA, thank you so much for sharing your journey and taking the time to chat with me today. Absolutely fascinating. And look, I wish you every success for the future. So, Mark, thanks so much.
You're very welcome, Peter. Good to talk to you.